Hey everybody, today is Wednesday, July 3rd, 2024. Coming up on the show today, from Beverly Hills Cop AXEL F, editor Dan Lebental.
It's not me trying to do anyone's particular view. I want to hear what the director's trying to do with the sensibilities, but then I want to use my own brain and think outside the box a little and ask myself, well, what can this movie be? And they said to me, look, what we were blown away by is you aren't a studio guy. You're really not the producer's guy. You're the film's guy. I'm about the movie. I also want to say that Top Gun kind of set the bar for how you do nostalgia right. Oh, yeah, that's that stuff that we like. They were like, wait, how's this going to work? Can you really do this? And it's like, I don't have to do it. And they go, wait, don't stop. We want you to do it.
Yes, all that and more on this extra special edition of The Rough Cut. Well, greetings, my friends. So good to have you over. Lots to talk about today, so let's get started. Take a seat, put on your party hat, grab a slice of cake. We have some celebrating to do. Why? Well, it's 4th of July tomorrow, that's one reason. But another is that it was 5 years ago today, as in July 3rd, 2019, that the Rough Cut roared back to life. Well, maybe not so much roared, maybe more like meowed. Here, I'll show you. This is going to be painful. As my dad used to say, this is going to hurt me a lot more than it's going to hurt you. What did the Rough Cut sound like back on day one? Well, like this, I'm afraid. Hello and welcome. Today is July 3rd, 2019. My name is Matt Fury, and this is the Rough Cut. Ugh, that is painful. I know what you're thinking. 5 years later, and it hasn't gotten much better, buddy. I know. Anyway, cringy intros aside, it's a moment to stop and celebrate our 5-year journey together. Yay! So if I had let that incredibly painful intro play out even further, you would have heard me introduce editor Dan Lebental, who was brave enough to take a chance on a young kid from the mean streets of Podcastville to come on the show and talk about his movie Spider-Man Far From Home. Over these past 5 years, Dan would be gracious enough to return several more times. He was on to talk about Elf, to talk about Bad Boys for Life, and last time we caught up with him was for Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves. And if you happen to listen to that one, you know he was busy cutting Beverly Hills Cop AXEL F when we were chatting with him. Well, guess what? Not only is today the 5th anniversary of the Rough Cut, it also happens to be the day that Beverly Hills Cop AXEL F comes out on Netflix. So I am thrilled to say that OG Rough Cut guest Dan Lebental is back on, 5 years to the day, to regale us with his true tales from the cutting room. I also want to give a special shout out to Netflix for making this possible. Clearly, if this podcast is coming out the same day as the film, I would need a little help from them to see the film in advance and to get their blessing to release this episode the same day as the film. They knew that it was important to me to make all this line up, and I really appreciate that they supported it. So a big thank you to them, and just one more reason for you to watch Beverly Hills Cop AXEL F. Someone else I want to thank and acknowledge is Extreme Music. It was they who, very early on in the podcast, reached out and said they liked what they heard and wanted to be a part of it. And if I have to play that intro from 2019 again to remind you what a risk they were taking, I won't, because I don't ever want to hear that again. But they have been a great partner to me and helped open the doors to some really talented people, like our pal Hans Zimmer, who I hope to have on the show again before the year is out. A great way to show your support for the Rough Cut and for great people like Extreme Music is to go see them the next time you need production audio for your film or TV show. In fact, how come I always do these ad reads dry without music? Let me drop a little Extreme Music down so I can do this right. There you go. Since 1997, that predates even this goofy show, Extreme Music has been providing storytellers like you with top-shelf tracks from A-list musicians and composers. Yeah, there's Hans Zimmer, there's Quincy Jones, there's Atticus Ross, there's Mark Mothersbaugh. There's no reason at all for you to go anywhere else for your musical needs. Search their enormous catalog of tunes using keywords like tempo, genre, lyrics, mood, stuff like that, or use their reference track technology so that you can upload a track to Extreme Music and they will find you ones like it. You can customize the stems, as in the instruments, you can get your tracks in different lengths, and as you know, when it comes time to sort out the licensing, of course you can do it online, but they also have wonderful people you can talk to who will help you sort through it. So the next time you have a story to tell it with great production audio from Extreme Music. All right, he's back, leading the pack of the Five Timers Club. From Beverly Hills Cop AXEL F, here's Dan Lebental.
love doing your show here, and I've actually run into people who have listened a lot to this. I was like, oh, it doesn't just go into space, so that's pretty cool. Um,
I don't know how to feel about that, Dan, but thanks.
well, I don't know anything. I'm not active on the in the whole blogs and social media.
Not me either.
Yeah.
I just make a podcast.
Well, you make it well.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
It's hard to believe, but when we last spoke, a little over a year ago, we were talking about Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves, which had just come out. But while we were talking, you were working on this film, Beverly Hills Cop AXEL F, which is out today on Netflix. Also, a month ago, you had another Jerry Bruckheimer movie come out, Bad Boys Ride or Die. How is that logistically possible that you have two big movies coming out very close together?
It really isn't possible, but it happened. What happened is that, I got started on Beverly Hills Cop, and Jerry would come in, and he was just so thrilled with some of the, early cuts as they were shooting. One day he walks in with Chad Oman, one of his other producers at his company, and they say, "Hey, you think you could do Bad Boys as well?" And I said, I mean, what's the overlap like? And they said, oh, it's going to be a small overlap. And I said, I would probably need a second editor on it. And I chose a guy who had been with my company many, many years ago, didn't have any feature credits. And after a lot of head scratching, his name's Asaf Eisenberg, put him on that. And so basically, everyone was kind. I said, it's got to work for both. And I wouldn't leave any stone unturned for a Beverly Hills Cop to do it. And in fact, if I had to let it go because of the logistics of it, I would let go Bad Boys. But somehow we did both at the same time with two offices across the street from each other and two crews, and it was pretty wild.
Were you literally running back and forth across the street between the two edit rooms?
Walking briskly, yes.
So when did you start and finish on each?
Well, gosh, as I recall, Beverly Hills Cop started last year somewhere around April or May, I think. Then Bad Boys started in June, July. And then we had something happen in Hollywood called the strike. So first the writers went on strike, and then the actors went on strike. And so I had gotten Beverly Hills Cop up to a point where we had all the principle, and we had even tested it, and it tested through the roof. Meanwhile, Bad Boys was going, and when the strikes hit, we hadn't finished principal photography on that one. So after a month or so, Beverly Hills Cop shut down to wait for the strikes to end, but Bad Boys just kept going. That's part of what made it all possible. Then when the strikes ended, thank God, Beverly Hills Cop was pretty well ready to go and went and did its additional photography, which every film does. Then Bad Boys additional photography was 3 weeks later. So it was a scramble, and then testing, and then today I have to be in Arizona, but I'll bring my laptop Avid with me and start cutting the scene that's coming in. It was pretty interesting. And then this year, in the 5 months before we finished everything, 5.5, I've done a year of work already, so I'm relaxing for a bit.
I bet. All right, well, let's go back to a time when you weren't so relaxed. You get the two cutting rooms across the street from each other. If we were to drop by either of those cutting rooms, what would we see? How do you like to have your editing room set up?
For my personal system, I like to have a 4 or 5 monitor system because I like my mixer on its own monitor. Then I have all the key assistant rooms right around me. The first, my longtime first, Don King, who wasn't too happy about having to, because she had really had to kind of logistically run both movies. And then I had sets of assistants on both, separate music editors. One thing that I do, and it actually made it all possible, is I have my embedded sound supervisor. Now it's the full-on sound supervisor. And I had a guy named Chris Diebald on Beverly Hills Cop, and on Bad Boys I had Warren Hendricks, and they're both fabulous. So the only two qualified in my world to do it, I got them both. So and that's what made it, because we would have to preview on a dime these movies. We didn't have time to stop for mixes or anything. We just did it. So it's by having the embedded guy in a hybrid Pro Tools media composer setup meant we can give them the bins and the media, they can service themselves. And then the movie's always in a near state of mixed for putting up in theaters. Like, Jerry has his own little theater, so we could do it however we needed to do.
So I was pretty sure you were going to bring this up because you've talked about it before. And when you have, I've gotten questions from people asking me to ask you for more details about it. I mean, I think you paint a pretty clear picture of what the setup is. But when you say hybrid Pro Tools media composer and embedded sound supervisor, maybe just walk us through like the flow, the process of what they're doing.
Well, classically, you have your editing team and your sound team, and they're in separate places. And you hand over things like media and I don't know, AAF, whatever the current system is, and you hand them to them in their remote place, and they're working somewhere else, doing their thing, and you meet with them and give them notes. Then when you're ready to do a screening, a preview, you have to stop and give them a few days to get everything caught up, and then you sit in there for 2 or 3 days and mix. Well, we didn't have any of that time, and I honestly haven't had that time starting in all the Marvel movies I did to do that stop, because things are happening in every day is like a week on these movies. It's pretty crazy. So by having the person literally sitting in a room 3 doors down from me that's set up to be a small mixing studio, they're in there, they're both designing, sending instructions back to the full sound team, and mixing. That was the final thing, is that we made the media composer the hub instead of the Pro Tools. So when they did it, at first they said, this is barbaric, but then they got into it. So they actually do the final leveling in the media composer that we screen for 400 or 500 people in a movie theater. So it's a brave technology. Now, I got a message the other day from Chris who said that Avid finally has both directions. We're so excited about that. We've been waiting forever to be able to have media go both ways from Pro Tools to Avid, that we can then embed these things into the mix, into the media composer.
I'm going to assume that Jerry Bruckheimer is the connection for how you get on Beverly Hills Cop AXEL F, but I don't know. So how did you get to be on Beverly Hills Cop, and what was the sort of, in air quotes, interview process?
Well, I got a call from Jerry saying, hey, would you do this? I had done the previous Bad Boys for him, and Jerry and I just hit it off. I mean, he is the ultimate commercial sensibility producer, and I feel that that's sort of my kind of slot as an editor, a very, everyman sensibilities. Now, the directors on these, they also have to be cool with it. And, because of Jerry's stature, they became cool with it, although they were constantly asking, so is our film better than that one? But, that's sort of how it came. I don't think that this is possible in any other way. Now, the studios had to be cool with it, too. There was a lot of questions from now. Netflix was always great. They're just easy to deal with. But, Sony was the suitor because they came second to it. And they were like, wait, how's this going to work? Can you really do this? And it's like, I don't have to do it. And they go, wait, don't stop. We want you to do it. It's like, but if you don't really, they're not comfortable, I don't have to do it. So, but then they were like, okay, we'll trust in Jerry in the process. And then we went for it.
Okay, so you and Jerry are simpatico on your styles and the approach to making a movie. When you interviewed with him for the first time, what was the feeling out process? How did you get to know, like, I think I'm going to be okay with him, and vice versa?
Well, the interesting part of that was that Bad Boys for Life, I had come off of Spider-Man Far From Home, and Tom Rothman, who's the head of Sony, is also very high on me as well. And they thought that they needed another more experienced hand to kind of take on Bad Boys for Life. So I got brought in. And when I first met Jerry, the interview was interesting. They told me afterwards is that, well, the studio said, we want this guy to do it. We weren't sure if you were a studio guy or whatever, but and they said to me, look, what we were blown away by is you aren't a studio guy. You're really not the producer's guy. You're the film's guy. I'm about the movie. I'm about, and it's not me trying to do anyone's particular view. I want to hear what the director's trying to do with the sensibilities, but then I want to use my own brain and think outside the box a little and ask myself, well, what can this movie be? And it that really helped that movie because it had some problems. So then Jerry pretty well instantly was like, okay, we like this, and he made allusions right away that, okay, I need you on my squad and no one else's. So there you have it.
We've established this isn't your first rodeo with Jerry Bruckheimer, but you are working with director Mark Malloy for the first time, which isn't all that surprising considering this appears to be his first studio feature, I think.
Yes, I had to interview for that though. So Jerry wanted me, but I still had to interview, and it still had to be all right with Mark. So we met, and what I like to do is that I don't talk so much about the nuts and bolts of how it's going to work. I talk about story. Story, 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 story. They say in the real estate there's location, location, location. But for me in movies, it's story, story, story. And I like to go meet with these guys and I like to tell them immediately the problems I'm seeing. Because I always figure we've got to cross this bridge if they're going to want input on things, story and script and all these things. So, I've read it. I've got my notes on what I have to say and what I think will be the real problems. Because sometimes, writers write great things like Gone with the Wind, Atlanta burns. It's like, what the hell does that mean? What are you going to do? So I like to talk about the challenges, and maybe the problems. Also, I always do start with what I really like. It's the first thing. And it should always be the first thing. Everyone should take that to heart is that because in the end you can only work from what's working. You can't work from what isn't. So you go, here's what's working. Let's try to make all the other stuff work like this.
Is there a different dynamic to your role as editor when you've done tons of big movies, but your director is relatively new to that world?
Yeah, I mean, I have to, with the first timers, I've done it, at least 10 of them or something. Yeah, to kind of help them and take them through. And, when they're alone with you, you can be very honest, like during the shoot, here's what's working, here's what isn't, here's this character may be perceived as this. So here's what, you've got to do. And it can be this scene isn't working or this, but it's, knowing that we always shoot way more movie than is actually going to be in. I'm more like, you need to steer it this way, you need to steer it this way. Now, on the other one with like Bad Boys, because those guys, Deal and Bilal, did the last one, they kind of knew. And even before Jerry asked me, they had contacted me to say, would you do it? So that was pretty cool. So, I already had them asking me. And some of it is when you deal with a super experienced editor who's done the kind of things that I've already done, there's also a political component to that. You need somebody who can protect your back, can make it easy. And I, made it easier, but that was such a gigantic scramble on this last Bad Boys. A lot of it was knowing when to strike, when to do things in terms of getting them what they wanted. The example of that is there was so much nervousness about is their action too violent, too visceral, too this or that. And sometimes to save it, you have to remove it for a minute and then do it. So there was a lot of that kind of politics too. And in the end, I'm not satisfied unless everyone else is satisfied. It's not enough to just get the box office win. I need, for my own edification, I need to feel like they got their movie. Jerry's got his movie. Studio's got their movie.
Are you more involved during production, during the dailies process? Are you giving that feedback more often during production than you might on a film where you're working with the director for like the fourth, fifth time?
Well, first I'll say the dailies process. 15 years ago, we would all meet at lunch or whatever to watch dailies together and discuss. That doesn't exist anymore because of the digital age. So it becomes up to them how much they want to communicate, the director that is, during production. Now, Mark was about the hardest working director I'd ever been with. He knew he was a rookie. He was going to seek out the information. He was going to live every moment. I mean, down to, doing group 80 hours of the backgrounds. He was going to live every moment. He was going to go and kick every tire, and that was great. There was a lot to do to service. He was going to take all my knowledge and experience and work with it. And so that was fabulous. And that's why coming out of this, he's going to be a giant, because he didn't just lay it off and walk away and hope it's good. He lived every moment so that now when he does it, he knows all the lessons that all the people had to offer him, including me. He took his DP from his world. He was a huge commercials director, but mostly Jerry wanted him around really experienced people to help him get through this.
What are you looking for when you read a script? What are the kind of things you're going to make a note about?
Well, I'm going to first take a note, as I say, about what's really working, but then I'm going to look first for logic things. Logic where, well, this doesn't make sense. If this happens and that, why didn't somebody do this? That kind of thing. As a collective, the audience always catches your logic errors. No individual catches them all, but as a collective, they do. So it's good to anticipate as many of those as you can while you go in, and then to try to understand the narrative flow if things are really in the right place. Sometimes we get something like a first act that first act is like an hour. That's not going to work. The audience wants the setup and then they want to move on and get to the good stuff. So we could fight that kind of thing. And then things like how you land it, is like on a cop, we knew that we didn't have the right. I mean, I talked about it in the script. We didn't have the right ending. We had to go back and get that. And we knew it. I said it before they started shooting, and I would say it when everyone walked in the room. And then ultimately, the writers got on it, and in the additional photography, we got the right ending. So it was great.
Before we even get into the story and the connections to the original films, we need to do something a little out of order and jump ahead to the needle drops, because those are a big connection to the Foleyverse, Neutron Dance, and The Heat Is On, and Shakedown. Before we even get out of Detroit and get to Beverly Hills, we hear all those hits from the first two Beverly Hills Cop movies. How does the needle drop process on a franchise picture that has a connection to legacy tracks like that compared to doing something like Iron Man 2, for example?
Well, there was so much discussion about that. Mark always wanted that, it to feel like the 80s movies, but with a more modern drive to it, pace and drive. But there was a lot of go round because, at one point they said, we cannot have music this old. But it's the nostalgia factor that really makes that work. That you want to feel like, oh, it's back. This is the thing I loved. And Mark fought tooth and nail for that. And personally, as an editor, I like to stay back a little and tell them when asked or when bought in, but not kind of get in that room. At least since I was with Jon Favreau, because I feel like my plate is already pretty damn full.
Especially with two movies.
Yeah, and I also feel like that if you're in the Bruckheimer world, that is absolutely their strong suit. And actually, I also want to say that Top Gun kind of set the bar for how you do nostalgia right. Oh, yeah, yeah, that's that stuff that we like, so we talked a lot about it, and we had a lot of go rounds before Mark really got what he was looking for in that. And then Jerry said, well, if you're going to do this, there's always hit music off of a Jerry Bruckheimer film. And he said, we have to take some of this and modernize it. So you got the little Nas X and all of that kind of stuff to sort of give the modern thing to find that Bruckheimer hit. So I would say I was more of an observer and an opinion of, well, this doesn't work or this isn't working as well as what we had before, that kind of thing. These films are musically driven too, so it's pretty darn important. And there's something about it when we started putting. There was a moment we didn't have the principal thing is called AXEL F. The actual song that I forget the composer. Felder.
Harold Faltermeyer.
Harold wrote ages ago, and it's so iconic. I listen to music from around the world. I'm right now really into Cuban music, and I heard Axel F in a Cuban song. It's like, wow, this is pretty crazy. So we had to find where that could exist because that's the thing. That is it.
Even before I hit play on this film, I was like, okay, where is AXEL F going to be in here? How are they going to employ it? It's got to be in there.
Yeah. And it was, and when Eddie gets into his thing, the Eddie Murphy stick, you want that, you want those cues. So Lorne Balfe, who, gosh, it seems like we're tied at the hip. We've done a lot of movies together. The composer, he would break down and do variations where he'd play with it and go around with it. And it was so cool. We got this huge palette of these things, and then our great music editor Allegra D'Souza would find ways to put it in. But boy, I think music took longer than anything to get in. They were working on that well past the cut. It was a big deal to get it right.
So when you talk about getting a palette of things, are you the type of editor to actually go in there and say, I'm going to play with the stems?
Not with two movies going on. No, having two wonderful, Robbie Boyd on the other one, having them, giving them instructions, giving them, there are a lot of editors that would, Jeff Ford, I'm sure would. But I like to utilize my team to its fullest. That's why I keep a crew that has varied talents that overlap other things. Because the composer hands us like I say, an early palette of things that they're working on, that they're thinking of. Oh, I'm trying this. And yes, we do get in there and do that. And then I do work directly with the music editors, but that's their gig. And I used to early on do that myself, but they're better than I ever was. So I want to bring out the most of my team. And then they ultimately are handed off to the director and producers, and they're all going through it with them too.
Do you ever find that there's kind of an inverse relationship between needle drops and score? Like if you have so many big needle drops that you're going to lay back a little more on just having so much score throughout, or is that not the case?
Well, we talk about this is where a needle drop goes, this is where a score goes, and we try things. There's no throwing the dart and hitting the bullseye right away. We are trying things. That's the process. It's really, honestly, the biggest difference between movies and television is how many more things, given the time we have, that we get to try. I might have a perfect cut in the first go round, but I'm going to try four other variations before I go, hey, I think I got it right the first time. But that's not to say sometimes I don't get it right till the seventh time. Whatever it takes, that's it. And music is absolutely the same. We are going to try things, even within, if you hear the heat is on during the snowplow chase, mind you, there's been 25 variations of that we tried before we settled on it. And some of it's because I keep changing the cut too. So they have to then change it. It's like, oh, it was perfect when you had it this way. And it's like, sorry.
I think earlier you said you have a commercial sensibility in a lot of ways to how you do things. But how would you describe the visual style of this film?
Well, Mark set out to do it retro. He wanted it to feel like he would take, even though there are tons of VFX in there, but so much is practical. The chases are, when I say practical, that means they're real. They're not VFX. So many of the chases, or flying a helicopter down Wilshire, that was awesome. That was so exciting to get that. But even that, as spectacular as that is, what turned me on was the actors bickering inside the inside the helicopters. Like, this is great. I was just like loving it. Just as soon as that stuff came in.
Yeah, you guys weren't satisfied with just having car chases. You had to up the game and have an actual helicopter chase. That is probably the biggest set piece in the film, I think. Just to get a sense of the visual effects process for Beverly Hills Cop, walk me through the evolution of a scene like that, from storyboards to animatics to previs and things like that.
Oh gosh, if we had storyboards, I never looked at them. Look, if I'm doing a Marvel film, all of those things are dead important because everything's a VFX shot. Nothing's real yet. So I got to piece together all the backgrounds. But this, because it's practical, I get it. And actually, the second editor on Bad Boys, Asaf, his tryout was doing some of the first passes on helicopter to do that. So that was pretty cool. And I said, okay, I'll put you on the other one now. But that's it. It comes in and it's like you were asking about the effects component. So you have certain things, some of the face doubles. Then you had a real helicopter mounted on a car flying through on near the ground. So many of the effects in that movie are painting out lights and all this stuff that's next to it as it streams down the road and that kind of thing. So there effects come in all kinds of natures. They putting the right reflections on things and all that. But there in that scene, there's a real helicopter, and it's crazy fun for me. That scene, the editorial. I don't know if I didn't say challenge. The fun of it was finding the rhythm of them bickering in there against the action that's around it. That's what makes it just so much fun to work on that.
So the bickering, the dialogue amidst all of that bombastic sound is really what makes it fun. That dialogue needs to be understood so that the jokes can pay off. Having just asked you about the visual iterations an action scene goes through, how about the sonic aspect? How do you go about building the soundscape so that you get this great immersive experience, but you also clearly understand the jokes, which are so important?
Well, again, I have my embedded sound supervisor, Chris Diebold. And boy, geez, I could hear him working on that all the time. I tried to be a few doors down so he wouldn't blow me out. But for months, I could hear various helicopters designing the sonic space. And then, we had to do it in a way that it sonically allows us to still have dialogue and music. These are things we speak about. We know these things are going to happen. So what can we do? Designing the motorcycles in the other chase, designing all this stuff. So that's what they're doing, and then they're presenting it to me for feedback. And then once I get to a point of that's great, which I was like such a fan of what he was doing, I was like, that's great. So then, hey, let's bring in Mark and show him. So that's kind of how that goes down. But that's the power of the system that I do, which is to be able to develop it in front of us, like a master craftsman, building an ancient church. So,
Wow. We were talking about the script, and you said, well, one of the things I check is the story logic. It's hard to believe that it's been 30 years since we've seen Axel Foley and 40 since we first saw him. Is the philosophy going into this that the folks that know the original movies, they're going to get a kick out of all these things, but we're not going to try and explain too much. We're just going to let the movie be the movie without having to worry about so much setup?
that's right. That's exactly right. And in fact, when we do the previews, one of the previewers' questions is, did you have to have seen these other movies to enjoy it? Because we want them to work as standalone movies. We want it to allude to things. They wouldn't mind if people go back if they hadn't seen them and watch the others. That's not a bad thing for these studios and producers. But we need the movie to stand on its own 2 feet so that if you'd never seen it, you could enjoy it. And that's very much something that everyone is concerned with.
So getting the movie going, as you said, we want Eddie to be in Beverly Hills, and he's going to start off in Detroit. We've got to sort of set up a reason for why he's going to Beverly Hills, as you would in any kind of movie. Tell me about working through that part of it.
Well, that is the challenge. That's the challenge with every movie is that these kind of Action comedies, generally, you start with an action set piece to get everyone settled, generally. Then you have to get your setup for the movie out as efficiently as you can. The audience has only so much patience. If you don't have the action set piece, they seem to have even less patience. So you have to be efficient with that. And everything, the writers, as they should, write more than you will use. So there is a bunch of stuff that gets left out. Well, how can we get there, as I say, as efficiently as possible? So that is a primary concern.
Do you recall the amount of footage and the length of your assembly?
Oh boy. I think the assembly was somewhere in the region of 210 to 215. And also, Mark asked me to do that too. He just said, well, let's dispense with the thing. If you see how it should work, just go for it. And I've had assemblies 3 hours long or even more. So it all depends on what it is.
How would you describe his shooting style?
As I said, he was very interested in the at least the camera style of the 80s, of the Beverly Hills Cop movies of Tony Scott or those directors from back then. So lots of cameras, some long lens in there. They brought some of the commercial sensibility with how they would frame heads, maybe a different haircut than others would do. They wanted it to look more active camera, almost never on sticks. If it was a modern Steadicam, it was always moving. They like to shake things. Iju, who's the cinematographer, that was part of the aesthetic that they agreed on. We sent back some notes of things was maybe a little too daring here. Let's keep their eyes in the frame. But no, it was generally, really cool. And just trying to get enough light to keep it literally light on them to keep it fun. If you're doing a comedy, there's a kind of a level of brightness that you want on things. You don't want things to be too moody. In fact, Jerry thought there was one thing that was way too moody that we cut significantly back. It was Axel's apartment. And he said, no, no, this is a comedy. And like I say, my sensibilities and Jerry's are very in line, so I could actually see it. Not that I hadn't done the work and built a beautiful, moody scene over there.
While we're on the subject of mood, poor Detroit always gets cast in this certain light. Literally, it reminded me of the film Out of Sight, which also takes place in Detroit and Miami. Detroit, it always has this cold blue tint, and then Miami, or in your case, LA, bright and colorful and happy.
Again, that's Mark and Iju. That was decisions they make, and I go by them. And then effects enhanced it. They shot it in mid freezing winter, but there wasn't enough snow still, so we added more. And to get those looks, absolutely, you just said it, to contrast Detroit with Beverly Hills. That was the thing that they had done in the past, and that was part of what really worked that Mark wanted to bring back.
You talked about the efficiencies of having the embedded sound team and having the hybrid Media Composer Pro Tools set up. With two movies going, just getting through the footage as well, did you have a process of accelerating the ability to absorb all this footage, how you watched all the dailies and things like that?
It's interesting. My process is a little different from other editors like, say, a John Ottman or whatever. So I cut from a point of view, meaning here's how I see the scene in my head. I've read the script, I see the scene in my head. And so what I do is I'm looking for those things. And it makes me able to hone in on what I'm looking for and to discard what I'm not looking for quickly. Now, during the process, the long process of a film, I'll have looked at every frame. I will, on my first passes, not have looked at every frame because I'm looking for things. Also, I'm a huge believer in using the Media Composer script-based editing. So, some of the old school guys still want to see it in rolls and play down all the stuff in order and mark it, all that. I don't have patience. I just go for it. So that's my process. And then, in either mine or the director's second guessing, we'll go through everything. But I use that script-based editing where I'm quickly going through each of those sentences. Here's what okay, that's what I'm looking for here. I don't need to look at the wide shot. I'm past that. I don't need to do this. This is an intimate moment. Here's what I want to do. And so that's how I can go quicker. And then in the course of it, I will learn every frame.
You've got Eddie Murphy in a movie. Of course, I'm going to ask about improv. Does Eddie do a lot of improv, or is he just focused on the joke up front and just nailing the performance of that joke?
Eddie does do a lot of improv, but it's not always planned. He just kind of goes with it with the actor, and I love it. So many of the jokes in that movie were found in things he just decided to do. He wouldn't do his iconic laugh as a rule. He doesn't do that. We got one that's kind of close to it, but that's something that Eddie made a decision of. So Eddie is his own bellwether of what to do, when to do it. His instincts are insane. Like, it's really interesting because he's very shy before he gets there and might not even get there on time. But when the camera starts rolling, oh my God, he's just amazing. So you never quite know what to expect. He's not like Downey, who everything is an improv as a rule. But his comedy instincts are ridiculous, you know.
Did he come into the cutting room at all or provide any notes that you got to work with?
No, but when I did meet him during the additional photography, he was very nice to me. He was like, bravo. So that means a lot to me, you know, seeing him. But that wasn't his style, as opposed to on the other one, Will was in the editing room.
You mentioned Dawn King earlier, and we should definitely spend some more time talking about her because she has been working with you for a long time.
95.
95.
Yeah.
Wow.
The best assistant in Hollywood.
I believe it. The notion of an assistant editor seemed to be that, well, assistant editor is a stepping stone to being an editor.
She had the choice. We talked about it a lot. She does cut, you know, in Cop, she actually cut the montage when he arrives to Beverly Hills. She cut the montage when he is driving through Detroit. You know, I'll look, maybe do a couple things to it, but I was like, you know, very, very happy to have her do that. She always does stuff for me, but it's not that. It's that's just some icing on the cake. What she does do, I don't manage the editing room. She manages it. She's the one that gets it all done. She's the one that keeps me in line because it takes a lot to keep me in line.
I believe it. Well, when we talked about her the first time, she made her way into a Marvel movie as the voice of an AI character.
Yeah.
Did she manage to get into AXEL F?
Did she? I think we all have a little something somewhere. I'm not sure on that one. Both movies are blended in my head.
So there's no Dan Easter egg we should be looking for?
Well, not wait, did I do for a while I was all over and the some of our other assistants because we do our we can get the actors in the editing room. We write a lot of additional lines to take care of other logic problems or things that are bridges. So, hey, Alan, one of my assistants, he was all over. I need you to sound like Judge Reinhold. I need you to sound like this. And so we build all these things and then later get the real actors or get sound alikes, then the real actors. So we do a ton of that kind of stuff.
So as far as Easter eggs go, you know, you get the same crappy blue Chevy Nova. You see a picture of Inspector Todd on the wall in Jeffrey's office. You got the Detroit Lions varsity jacket. The one Easter egg I wasn't expecting to see because it's not part of this universe was Shooter McGavin.
Yeah, that was fun. That was fun. That whole area of the film, it goes from the helicopter to Shooter, and then into that valet who was a show stealer himself. That's quite the run. But Shooter was great. Yeah, the it's like, hey, I was like, hey, how did this? I don't know what the connection to the movie or to Bruckheimer or to whoever.
I can't find one. That's what's so weird about
Yeah,
it, but it made it great.
yeah.
Cutting comedy is one of the more difficult things to do because of just that what is funny and also just the repetition that you go through as an editor, something that's hysterical on day one, you know, 2 months later, you're looking at the same joke going, it's just not landing anymore. What do you do in a situation like that? Do you have people that you go to?
Yeah, the audience. Honestly, you first go by what you feel is funny. Then the rest of the team is in there. I look very closely at all the assistants in there about whether they're laughing or not. And, everybody, the music, everybody. And then it's the preview audiences that then tell us, okay. And even that, I know this is funny. Does it deserve another preview in case that preview audience is tainted
Yeah,
somehow?
you can have a bad
You
audience.
can. It's the scariest thing because so much is riding on it, and you can have a bad audience. A short aside on that is that after Elf came out and it was a big hit, I was in Canada and I took my Canadian friends to see it. Crickets, crickets, not laughing. And God, I guess it isn't very good.
There's so many fun scenes in this movie. Do you have a favorite scene from the film that you cut?
Favorite scene? Well, it is the helicopter is absolutely the favorite for me because that's one of the funniest scenes I can think I've ever been associated with. So yeah, that one, that's the favorite.
So it's hard not to be reflective in this interview because you're doing a movie that goes back 30 to 40 years in terms of the franchise. We first started talking, at least on record, 5 years ago. If it's at all possible, what has changed for you over these past 5 years in terms of your perspective, the way you practice your craft? Looking back to 2019, what's changed the most in your job?
Okay, so due to the pandemic, we still have a component of remote editing going on. And so, I mean, at one point I got COVID again during these movies. Went back to my loft and just kept editing, jumping into whichever editing room that I had to. So they like you to be there on premises, but I probably did about 15 to 20% remote. So that's there, and I think I like it. I like, the only thing that was bad about it was that I cut in 5:1, and you can't do that yet with those kind of things. So that was pretty nice being able to, I'm going to work remote today and doing it that way. So other things, well, with the Marvel movies, except for Iron Man, it was the only one with a single editor, which was me. All the other ones, they mandated that you have to work with somebody, um, and now I've just flipped the switch on that. Doing no, I'm going to do two movies instead of two editors on one movie. I'm going to do one editor on two. So.
You said you and Don have been together since 95, so you can do the math. You know that you've been editing for quite a while. It's hard to imagine you doing anything else, but if you weren't editing, what other job could you see yourself doing?
Let's see. I could have a little video store which has VHSs in somewhere in Iowa or somewhere. I don't know.
Uncle Dan's Video Hut? Sounds great to me.
Yeah, I don't know what else I'm qualified to do. I was a busboy. It was my first job, and that was too hard. So, yeah, hopefully editing keeps going for another decade.
Can I book you for July 3rd, 2029?
Yeah, sure. Hopefully I'm still I'm still doing it.
Well, there you have it. Where has the time gone? More importantly, what does the next 5 years hold? I don't know that I see myself doing this in 5 years, but I never saw myself doing it in the first place. Regardless, it would not have been the same without Dan. Thank you, Dan. Thank you for coming on the show today. Thank you for coming on the show over the years. And without question, thank you for coming on the show that very first time 5 years ago. Keep up the great work, and we will all keep an eye out for what you do next. I should also thank all of the enormously talented artists who have given up some of their all too precious free time to come on the show. I always learn something from them, and I hope you do too. Someone else I should thank, honestly, is Avid. It's helped to figuratively and literally provide a home for me most of my life. And like everything in life, it's had its ups and downs, but it has given me incredible opportunities, taken me to amazing places, and introduced me to unforgettable people. And because of that, all I ask of you is to take a good hard look at Meeting Composer if you haven't done it before. It's done all right by me, and I honestly believe it can help you as well. Finally, and most importantly, I want to thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for honoring these amazing artists that come on the show. Thank you for reaching out every now and then. I love doing it, but this is a hard show to do most of the time. Getting to know a lot of you and hearing about your own journeys is a big part of why I keep doing it. So I hope you keep listening, and I hope you keep letting me know how you're doing. It's a tough business to be in, this film and TV business, but just keep fighting. I'm pulling for you. Well, 5 years or not, that's going to do it for today's show. I'm going to take a little break for the 4th. I hope you get some time to relax as well, wherever you are and for whatever reason. I expect to be back with a new show on July 15th. I hope to see you there. Until then, this is Matt Fury thanking you for joining me right here on The Rough Cut.